Houston, we have a podcast. You're listening to the premier Rockets podcast. It's H-Town Hoops, hosted by Brandon Scott and Adam Spolane.
It is the H-Town Hoops podcast. I'm Brandon Scott here with Adam Spolane, Austin Mendez, handling everything behind the scenes. And we are recording this, Adam, coming off of an unexpected Rockets win, and they were about to face the Oklahoma City Thunder on Wednesday. And they beat the Detroit Pistons on Saturday in their most recent game. They've had a few days off here, but in their most recent game, they beat the Detroit Pistons in an unexpected win without their top three players. And I just want to start off with that. Like, did that surprise you, given how they've played? Obviously, Kevin Porter Jr., I believe that was the 9th game, maybe, that he's missed in a row. But with no Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, a late scratch with a non-COVID illness, and I saw that he apparently was back at practice on Monday. But without those guys, did it surprise you, given how they played with those guys, that they were able to pull off what they did on Saturday against the Pistons?
Yeah, I mean, they're the worst team in the league, and they don't have their three best players. So you would think that it would be tough to win a game. And they started off the game so poorly, where just in the blink of an eye, they're down 16-4, and John Lucas, who's filling in for Steven Silas, he's benching a starter. He's benching KJ Martin pretty quickly. But give them credit. They bounced back and they played hard, and it shows you a lot of just when you play hard, good things are generally going to happen. And we just haven't seen that consistent sort of effort out of this group. And you saw it on Saturday. And even if you're down your three best players, you can still win a game just by playing hard, just by playing the game the right way. They only gave up 4 fast break points. I mean, that's absurd with as bad as they've been in transition. And Jonathan Fagan said it really well earlier today. He said basically the Pistons did all the stuff that the Rockets normally do, where they play terrible transition defense. They do stupid things. They don't necessarily play the game the right way. So it was good to see. It was just, we talk so much about tanking and, you want to lose these games, but just seeing the way that the team reacted to winning the game and making big plays down the stretch. That's why winning games really matters, because you need that sort of competitiveness, and you need to see that out of your players. And they did that on Saturday. So good win for them, good win for those guys. And you just want to see if they can put games together and play with that sort of effort every single night.
Yeah, that was really the thing that stood out to me, was how, that initial lineup that they put out there with Jabari Smith at the 5, and we'll get to him in a little bit later. But that initial lineup that they put out there was bad, man. They got down to a 16-4 deficit, I believe it was, or it was something to that effect. It was pretty bad early on in the game, and it looked like it was going to kind of be that same old story. And mind you, this is, of course, as you know, coming off that dreadful performance the game before, right? So yeah, I mean, you're coming off this dreadful performance against Washington or against Cleveland, and you start off the game like that, and then, Adam, they put in the next unit, the Jayshawn Tates and and the Garubas, and they put in some of these other guys, these hustle guys, and of course Tari Eason, who we talked about a lot in the last podcast, had another amazing game. And you just saw the effort go up. And one of the things I know you wrote about, and this was noteworthy in the game, was the sort of, I don't know if confrontation is the right way to frame it, but of course KJ Martin and John Lucas, who was coaching for Steven Silas, who was away for a memorial for his father, they got into it early in the game, and he benched him. And he pouted, KJ Martin did, for a little bit on the bench. But to his credit, and you talk about effort, I mean, KJ is the ultimate effort guy. And I'm not sure, I would say he's the ultimate athletic and IQ guy. Maybe sometimes, I don't know if there's a question of effort with the team as a whole. But KJ Martin, to his credit, came back and responded and was very key in that game, in that win. And I thought guys like him and Tari Eason, and of course Jayshawn Tate really led the charge in that. And I don't know, it was something to be said for me, Adam, to have these guys out there and seeing the effort look like that without the top three. There was even a point I think in the second quarter, by the second quarter, where like 11 guys had played, everybody but Boban had played, and everybody had scored, you know. And so it just made me wonder. It's like, well, why can't that same like why does it have to be addition by subtraction? You know, it seemed like a conundrum. You know, like why can't that same sort of effort be there when the key guys are there as well?
Yeah, I wish I could answer that question. It's one of those. It's one of those things that I think has been probably most frustrating about this season for them is that just on a night in, night out basis, that effort just isn't there. And I'm sure that they would love to be able to explain that. So it's been one of the dumbfounding aspects of the first whatever 50 some odd games of this season.
Jabari Smith had that block that I don't know if I would say went viral, but amongst Rockets Twitter maybe and Rockets, Reddit and message boards, that block where he goes up there. I don't he doesn't just get up, but like stretch Armstrong type stuff. I don't know. It was like this was in the third quarter. And he pins this this layup right up on the backboard. And it just had me thinking, like, okay, this is what the vision was right here. This is exactly what they're, a guy who can just guard pretty much any position, and then like, you can see him on the perimeter, and then all of a sudden, also, he's a rim protector, and in a very like unique and special kind of way. What did you make of, obviously, with Alperen Sengun being out, that thrust Jabari Smith into the 5 role? What did you think of that? First of all, I'll just say it was cool. One of the little side notes and tidbits was watching him and Duran, the two of the youngest players, Jabari Smith and Duran, the Pistons rookie, go up against each other. I think Duran is actually the youngest player in the NBA, and Jabari Smith is not that much older than him. But what did you make of seeing Jabari at the 5? And do you think that there's something to that going forward?
I do think ultimately that might be the way to go. Now he has to get better at it. And part of that is just he's got to get bigger and he's got to get stronger and he's got to be able to handle defending bigs. And that's just not really there for him right now, just because he's skinny. So once he's able to add some weight, and I asked him about this today, and I asked him, do you have like a target weight? And he said he didn't. But I mean, the big thing is just making sure that he's able to, maintain the athleticism and just some of the other things that make him a real special talent. But when you look at how teams defend right now, and we've talked about the Alperen Sengun defensive stuff, a lot lately, but I feel like for them moving forward, having Jabari Smith or even Tari Eason, you've seen them do this with Tari Eason now just in the last week, having them guard the opposing team's center, that allows you to hide Alperen Sengun on a wing. And so what they did against Minnesota last week was and Jabari Smith didn't play this game. So it was Tari Eason playing at the 4, and they started Eason on Rudy Gobert, and then they put Sengun on Kyle Anderson. And I do think that this is something, and I'll ask Stephen Silas about this in the next couple of days. He went to practice today. But I do wonder if this is what they feel like they can do moving forward, because I do think one of the areas, and I know with Sengun, the numbers aren't quite as bad as some people may think, but the problem is that they can really only defend pick and rolls one way with Sengun, and that's to play drop coverage. And one of the issues with that is it's really easy to prepare for. So if you're an opposing team and you're running an action, I know exactly how the Rockets are going to defend that action when Sengun is in. Now, if all of a sudden we put Sengun on a wing, now maybe we can't run that same action. And if it's Jabari Smith, let's say it's a pick and roll with D'Angelo Russell and Rudy Gobert. If it's Sengun guarding Gobert, I know exactly what the Rockets are going to do in that spot. It's very easy. It's an easy play for us. But let's say it's Eason or it's Jabari Smith. Now all of a sudden the Rockets have a few more options. And maybe they can switch that pick and roll. Maybe they can blitz it. So it gives you a few more options. I think it makes it a little tougher to prepare for. And now, let's say if you do want to try and take advantage of Sengun along the perimeter and you want to get Kyle Anderson in a pick and roll with Russell, well, then the Rockets can just trap that. And if they want to give the ball to Kyle Anderson, just let him cook. Let him have the ball and make him make a decision. So I feel like if you can. If Jabari Smith gets to the point to where you are comfortable with him defending bigs, and whether it's post-ups or whether he can handle just the physical aspect of it and he can box out his man, then I think that might be the way to go to cover up some of Alperen Sengun's deficiencies defensively.
Yeah, I almost just wish they just do it anyway. Like we just as he develops, like we saw him defend Giannis earlier in the season, and look, he's skinny. You and I have stood close to him. He's a skinny guy. We can see it on TV. He's young, but I mean, he's going to grow into it eventually, and he's got the skills to do it. And Alperen Şengün, like for all the reasons that you just laid out and described, to me, the better option is just kind of giving, maybe having Jabari doing a little bit of that tough love there. And I know you might suffer for it, but I mean, you're not winning games anyway, for the most part. And I think I think it's just more important to his development. And I get it. Like if he just flat out can't do it, then it's not tenable. But I would just I would just try it, or just be more open to trying it, because I mean that's his most valuable, I think, most valuable asset as a prospect, as a guy that you were drafting, and here you are in a situation where one of your more valuable offensive players is a liability defensively. So if you can make up for that in any way with this guy, I think I don't know, it to me it seems like the obvious way to go.
Yeah, and Duran is a really tough test for Smith just because he's as physical as it gets.
Yeah,
And
he's the opposite. He's the opposite
yeah,
of Jabari in terms of physical development at that age, right?
yeah, and that was one of the things too that kind of sold me a little bit on Chet Holmgren coming into the draft, because Holmgren went against him in the NCAA tournament, and I know Holmgren fouled out of that game, but he actually held with Duran pretty well physically. He fouled out because the officiating in that game was just brutal, but it was a good test, and they've got Oklahoma City coming up. I think that might not be that's probably a decent team to try this out against, just because Oklahoma City really doesn't have the center that's all that imposing. So maybe you can do it that way. But it is something that I do think that they need to dabble in just a little bit. I mean, you don't have to do this exclusively, but just give it a shot. And I do think that they believe that Eason physically can handle defending bigs, because you saw him do it against Minnesota, where it was Eason who was defending Gobert. Now you can't do this against everybody. You're not going to put Jabari Smith on Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid later this month, but it is just another option, because we saw this Silas's first year. They ran a lot of different defenses, and they would do it within a quarter. They would run a lot of different stuff, and they'd have a lot of variety with their defense, and they can't really do that right now. They're very bland on that end of the floor. So I think it would be interesting just to see moving forward some of the different things that they can do with Şengün, trying to, hiding Şengün on a wing, and then giving Jabari Smith that assignment on the big, and just see how teams react to it.
Hey, before we move on, since you mentioned Tari Eason, I know we talked a lot about him in the last episode, but how good has he been in this stretch? I mean, the other night, and he's going to have some moments as a rookie. It seems like there's always a moment every game also where it's like, oh, Tari did this, but he always more than makes up for it with his effort. And I don't know, maybe I'm overhyping it in my mind because it was an effort win. It was an effort game, and that's what Tari Eason is, an effort player. But this stretch from him has been, to me, really encouraging for the Rockets.
He's disruptive, but he, like you said, he makes some bad. I mean, he got John Lucas a technical foul.
But that was good. That was good because they immediately after. I don't know if you could just say because of the technical foul. That's
you're not the one paying the fine.
Yeah,
I mean,
true. Fair enough.
Head coach money. He can't afford to get all these technicals.
Man, John Lucas has had a job for however many years in the NBA, man. Life is good. But no, I'm not certainly though. Leave it to me to not be in John Lucas's pockets. I can tell you that. I'm not gonna be in that man's pockets or trying to get him fines. But yeah, man, I've just been really impressed with Tari Eason, and maybe again, because that was an effort win, that was a bust your ass type of win, and that's what Tari Eason does. And he did, have a decent game, a really good game there. It would kind of just heightened it for me because you didn't have, obviously you didn't have Jalen out there, and you didn't have Alperen Şengün out there, and it was just kind of this hodgepodge of guys that were just getting after it.
Yeah, he fits with basically everyone on the floor too. And You know, in all honesty, he reminds me a lot of KJ Martin. He's not, obviously, he doesn't, he's not the athlete that KJ Martin is, but they're both just disruptive and they both, make plays just based on effort. So he fits in well. And like I said, you can put him with any five guy or with any 5-man lineup. You can have Tari Eason out there and it'll be a successful lineup.
All right. Speaking of lineups, man, I felt like the Cavs loss from Thursday, and you mentioned this, I think, in Gallery Sports, but like Kevin Porter Jr. has been out for however many games now, and they they were without in that game. I think Eric Gordon and Jayshawn Tate missed that game, right?
Yes.
And then they came back on Saturday. The Cavs game was so hard to watch. It was like, I mean, it was just bad from the very beginning. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they didn't have any point guards or anything analogous to a point guard, which would be, say, Jayshawn Tate or even Eric Gordon. And again, obviously, Kevin Porter hasn't been around. And then there's the question even of Kevin Porter Jr. as point guard, right? Like the point guard conundrum was, to me, has never been more pronounced, I think, than in that particular game. And I know, the win against the Pistons wasn't necessarily like, oh, here comes, like because of like point guard play necessarily. It's more of like hustle and effort and and guys just busting their ass like we mentioned. But like, how much did that game has this stretch shown, like with the Rockets having this point guard problem, this obvious point guard problem that the Rockets have, shown how much point guard play matters?
Well, it's just a guy who gets you into your offense and who can get you organized and know what a defense is trying to do and get the ball to the right person. And a lot of that is just experience. And you look at the point guards that they have on the roster. You're talking about Kevin Porter Jr., who's he's the old guy he's the experienced guy, and he's basically been a point guard for 2 years at this point. That's not a whole lot of memory. You're not going by a whole lot there. You have Dacian Nix, who is probably one of maybe their most natural point guard, I guess you could say, but he hasn't been effective for most of the season. Ty Washington is obviously learning how to play the position. And then you have Eric Gordon, who's not a natural at that job, but he at least has been in the league and seen basically every type of defense that you can play, so he can get you organized. And then you have Jayshawn Tate, who has played just about everything, but he played some point guard at Ohio State. But it's just somebody who gets you organized. You can get the ball up the floor. He can get you a shot when you need it, and it's an underrated aspect of the job. I remember they played a game last year, and Dennis Schroeder had to start. And you just saw the difference with Schroeder on the floor, just with him getting everybody involved, him understanding, all right, this guy needs the ball here. This guy has this matchup. We can get him the ball in that spot. It's little things like that that get you into your offense and help you win games. And also the ability to just not turn the ball over. I mean, turning the ball over just puts your defense at such a disadvantage, and you also don't get a shot on the offensive end. So the point, they've kind of neglected that spot. At least, I mean, they're going to do everything they can to get Kevin Porter Jr. and they want him to be that guy moving forward. But the problem I think that they have made, or the decision that I don't think has really worked out, is just the second point guard, because they don't have one on the roster. I think they wanted it to be Knicks. That hasn't worked out. I don't think it's going to work out, to be honest with you, at this point. We've seen more than a half a season, but moving forward, they need to find another guy who can at least play that position, get you into your offense, especially when Kevin Porter Jr. isn't on the floor. And asking Eric Gordon to be a point guard for 30 minutes a night during this stretch, it's not real conducive to him being successful either. So it's an area that they have neglected over the last year. And I do think that as we get into the trade deadline, I'm not saying that they should be buyers. They shouldn't be buyers, of course. But if they can find a way to get another point guard on the roster just to help you get through these last 30-something games, I do think that would be important.
I wanted them to re-sign Dennis Schroeder, Adam. I wanted them to bring him back last year, and I had Rockets fans, and even I felt like even a couple media people telling me that, hey, man, that doesn't make sense, that he'd get in the way of the develop. Every time I have I have the nerve to think that there should be a veteran on this team that should be playing. It's like, hey, that guy's going to get in the way of the development of so-and-so. And like, I just don't get that. Like, should they have re-signed Dennis Schroeder or something like him? Like, it seems like pretty obvious now. Like, you had a guy like that who not only could have been your backup point guard, but arguably could have been your starting point guard if you weren't so damn committed to the Kevin Porter Jr. as point guard thing.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I don't know.
I think they wanted to give Knicks an opportunity, and he was a guy who had been in their system, and they really, I mean, they're telling people that they thought that he would have been a lottery pick, and that's how.
And he played well in the G League. I'm not going to do revisionist history here. I was a Knicks stan in the beginning, in the very beginning. So,
and there are people who will tell you that he's awesome in practice. I mean, I heard it just in the summer, just how excited they were about Knicks and how some people thought that he might take over the starting point guard position. I mean, that's how highly they thought of him, and it just hasn't been able to translate into games. So I don't necessarily think that Schroeder would have been the guy to bring in that spot, just because Schroeder was going to want to play, and if he's behind Porter and he's behind Knicks, that's not a great opportunity for him. But once you kind of realize that the Knicks thing isn't going to work, then maybe that's when you have to start looking outside the organization just to get somebody in, just to get somebody who can absorb some of those minutes. And you've seen it where Knicks is basically completely out of the rotation. I know he started the game on Saturday, but that was more out of necessity than anything else. So they got however many games left, 30 something. I'm really interested to see what type of if they give Daishen Nix one more look, one more opportunity to try and lock down something, because again, he shows out well in practice, and that's not the games, but that's one opportunity for him. And remember, his contract is not guaranteed past this season. So this might be a do or die thing. But like you said, there's this thinking that the only way you can develop players is to have them play in the games. That's a nice way to do it. That is a way to develop players, but you develop players in practice too. I mean, you work on a lot of stuff in the gym, and that's also a way for you to be able to develop players. So I don't think it would have hurt them to bring in another point guard. I definitely don't think it would hurt them to bring one in now, but it is something that they have. Again, it's a position that they have neglected, because I do think that they have wanted. They found these two guys. They found Porter. They got him for nothing from Cleveland. He was a wing with the Cavs, so they wanted to turn him into a point guard. Then you have Knicks, a guy that, again, they got for nothing. He went undrafted. You're trying to turn him into something. So I do think that they saw these two guys that were undervalued by the rest of the league, and they thought they could turn them into something. Porter's been good for them. Porter was a good pickup. We'll see about Knicks, but again, it's an area that they just haven't had an adult in that position basically since Schroeder left.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide, Adam, and just think this through. Like, what makes more sense for them to pursue? Like, does it make more sense? Like, the priorities are what the long-term development and the future and all of that. But what's more conducive to that? Like, just letting Daishen Nix, even though it seems like you've got enough of a sample size already to kind of feel like that that's not really the answer. So given that, does it make more sense to try to bring somebody in? Or at this point, does it not really hurt you to not be great there, and to just continue out the Knicks thing? And the upside of that is, or the best case scenario with that is you figure it out, or something does happen there. Like, should they be targeting or is this something to be thinking about for free agency? Like a Fred VanVleet or Corey Joseph type of guy. Like, I don't know. Like, how soon should they pursue this? Like, when should they punt on what they're doing now at point guard?
Well, I mean, there's a guy with a beard who plays point guard out in Philly, who I think that they will probably try to make a run out this summer. But you can bring in someone though right now and still not give up on Daishen Nix. I mean, he still has that roster spot, and he can still continue to get work in practice, and then he's with you in the summer, and then he's with you in training camp, and then that's maybe when you can make a decision. They have, I do think one of the things that they have, and again, I talk about how they kind of have neglected the point guard position. They have the two-way spots, and they have both been used on Trevor Hudgens and on Darius Days, and those guys have been on two ways the entire season. They have gotten nothing out of those two guys on the NBA roster. They have not contributed at all in NBA games. And to me, I think that's been a little bit of a waste. And so they might like Hudgens, they might like Days, but go sign a point guard to a two-way. Just get somebody on a two-way who can come up and contribute on the NBA roster for the rest of the season and just give your guys an opportunity to try and run a functional offense, because it's so hard to run an offense in this league when you don't have a point guard. And if you want Porter to be the guy, okay, let him be the guy, but at least bring somebody off the bench who can do that job for you also.
I gotta say, man, I'd much rather see that guy with the beard out there running point guard. I'm not gonna lie. Not gonna lie. For somebody who was just like disgusted, I don't know, I guess that's the right word for how things ended there with Harden, or just, I mean, I thought it was just all in poor taste, all of it, turned off by all of it. I gotta admit, man, I wouldn't mind seeing the guy with the beard running the point guard. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just because I know how good he is, and maybe that's in part because I've seen how bad it's been over here. But gotta say, I'm not opposed to them dabbling in that. Is if for no other reason, man, the drama and the conversation around it would be, I don't know, it seems like it would be fun to cover, like this spectacle of James Harden coming back to Houston. So
Yeah, I mean, well, I have a feeling the topic will come up again between now and July 1st.
no doubt, no doubt. All right, let's move on to Jalen Green, man. I know he missed this last game on Saturdays. Honestly, man, I was thinking about this. Jalen Green durability, for a slight guy. No questions about so far about Jalen Green's durability, man. It's only really missed, after the hammy early on in his rookie year. He's played every game except the suspension game, which shouldn't have even happened, damn it, if the assistant coaches do their jobs and make sure that nobody leaves the bench. And then this first game. So that's for all of the knock on Jalen Green and inconsistencies and effort, I give him credit for at least being available for the most part. Doesn't seem to get injured a lot. But you noted, and I noted it as well, like whenever this guy plays against any of his draft mates, anybody from his draft class, it's it's a talking point, it's a conversation piece, it's worth watching. And and we've talked about this on the podcast before, how his role and Evan Mobley's role in Cleveland are totally different. Evan Mobley is allowed to kind of just be a part of the system. They got a lot of good players around him, and he's not forced to be their best player, whereas Jalen Green is the exact opposite. But Evan Mobley had the better game in the Cleveland game, and then coming up here, it's funny watching some of the conversation about like Jalen Green versus Josh Giddey. Like I never thought that would actually ever become a discussion of any kind, but it's because Josh Giddey's played really well, and because Jalen Green has been inconsistent, that even allows that to be something that people talk about. But what do you think about this opportunity for Jalen? Do you think he'll, first of all, do you think he's going to be back? Or did y'all get a sense for that when y'all were at practice on Monday? And what do you think about this little stretch here of Jalen Green kind of having this opportunity? We would have had it too against Cade Cunningham, but both of them were injured. Neither one of them were able to play. What have you thought of this opportunity for him to kind of go up against his peers?
Well, so he did not practice today. Lucas said that they are hopeful that he'll be able to play. So we'll see. They're going to practice again tomorrow, so we'll have a better idea then. I don't care. This is one of those things that it's more a media thing than anything else, but I don't really care how these guys look against one another when they're 20 years old and their second year in the league. I hope, if I'm Jalen Green, the last thing I want him doing is comparing himself to the guys that he was drafted with at this point. I don't want him looking at box scores to see how Josh Giddey is doing, or how Franz Wagner is doing, or how Evan Mobley is doing. I don't want that, because that's taking his focus off of just simply getting better. So the only thing that matters for Jalen Green and all these other guys is getting better. It's not about the guys who are drafted before them. It's not about the guys who are drafted after them. It's just about getting better and worrying about your own game. And that's the big part of the whole draft thing too, is that if you're the Rockets, in all honesty, you don't care if you draft second and you get the best player in the draft. That's not what you're worried about. Once you draft the guy, all you care about is if he turns into a great player. So if ultimately Evan Mobley turns out to be a better basketball player than Jalen Green, Who cares just as long as Jalen Green turns out to be a great basketball player? The Rockets passed up on Michael Jordan, number 1 in 1983, but I think they're okay with who they drafted. I mean, that still worked out well for them because they also, while they didn't get Michael Jordan, they wound up with one of the greatest players to ever play the game. So I don't get, if I'm them, if I'm him, I'm just not worried about the whole, who he's facing right now.
Yeah, so here's why, and I would agree with you on the point about Jalen Green and his internal focus. Like, I hope he doesn't internalize any of this and just kind of focuses on what he's supposed to be doing in his own game and his own development. But the reason why it matters to me is not even necessarily about the individual players themselves, or I guess what's more noteworthy to me about all of it is really watching what's around them and what the organizations around them are doing and how they're setting up their players and how they're developing their players. And that's what stands out to me about it, Adam. Like Jalen Green, like to me, I can't help but wonder, like it's hard to be like, well, what if Jalen Green played for the Cavaliers? That doesn't really make any sense. Or like, what if he played for the Oklahoma City Thunder? That doesn't exactly make sense. But the idea is, what if this organization was doing, it felt like this organization was doing what those organizations were doing in terms of just player development and coaching and surrounding your players with, the best opportunities to succeed. I don't know. It just and so maybe that's more of the point. It's more of an organizational comparison of, hey, here's how this team is developing its young stars and its young core, and versus like even against Detroit, Adam, like Dwayne Casey, somebody that is well respected around the league, and what is it in his 5th year now in Detroit? I think, right? Like to me, it's just you look around and you're like, man, why why does it seem like this kid's just out there at some point? We're critical on the guy. It's not like he doesn't share any of the blame for some of the inconsistencies, obviously, and the effort issues. But it's like, man, I really wish that this guy had the infrastructure around him that his peers do, and especially whenever you see them close up, and you're kind of able to do that comparison from afar, even if you're hoping that the player himself is not internalizing it that way.
Yeah, no, it is important to see just kind of structure that you have as an organization. And I remember Jerry Krause, the old GM of the Bulls, who put together those 2 3-peat teams. He said something that he got some heat for, and he said that organizations win championships. And it was almost like he was like taking the credit for those 6 championships. It's not really what he was doing. What he was saying is basically the entire organization wins you championships. The players are obviously a huge part of it, but what you have around the players and the support stuff that you have around the players, that stuff matters too. And I think the one thing that you've seen, Oklahoma City seems to have it down. I mean, that team has exceeded a lot of expectations. Now, it's beneficial that they also started this rebuild process with an all-star. And, getting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in that trade for Paul George turned out to be absolutely huge, and that really set them up. Whereas a team like the Rockets, they're starting from complete scratch. A team like the Pistons, they're for the most part starting from complete scratch. So that's where it gets hard, and that's where that's where it helps to have other good players on the floor who can help you win games so that you're not getting blown out by 20 and the games don't matter after halftime. You want these guys to be in a competitive environment a lot. And I thought that's what was good about Saturday, is that you saw how competitive those guys were. You didn't have all your best guys, you didn't have all your key guys, but they were competitive and they wanted to go out and win. And that's how they make the plays. That's how you get better as a team, is when you're in those moments, when you're competitive and when you're trying to win and you're in crunch time and you're just trying to figure out and you're trying to eke out wins. I think that's how you develop too. Yeah, it's not just about skill development. It's about learning how to win. That's part of development also.
Yeah, man. I just can't get over how it was some of the most fun I've had watching them play all year. Some of it, they've obviously had better games than that, but some of the most fun I've had watching them play all year, and they were missing the key characters, man. Like I just, for whatever reason about it, I can't get over that. I'm like, man, this doesn't seem like it should be right, but it's exactly it's exactly what happened. All right, man, let's get out on this, because this report was out there that the Rockets might be interested in John Collins, who Atlanta Hawks apparently have been looking to trade or shopping around for a trade. Does this make sense? Should they do this? Help me understand. Other than the fact that John Collins is a good basketball player, I was able to rationalize it in that way, just like basic logic of, well, they could use more good basketball players, and John Collins is a good basketball player, so maybe that's why it makes sense. But everything else to me doesn't seem like it lines up you know, with exactly the way they're building this team. Am I missing something on the John Collins pursuit or potential pursuit?
He's a good player. He's versatile. He can do a lot of different things on the court. The contract, it looks big, but all NBA contracts look big, and the way the salary cap is going to go up year after year after year, it doesn't make it look that bad. And he might be a distressed asset. It's one of those things where maybe you can, get John Collins for 75 cents on the dollar. That makes it worth it. To me, it's not necessarily a move that I would make because he plays a position that so many of your other guys already play.
Right.
So if you bring in John Collins, now you're probably taking away minutes from Shingun, or you're taking away minutes from Smith, or you're taking away minutes from Eason or Tate or some of these other guys. So I don't see a trade necessarily happening. It seems like they've been trying to trade him for years and years and years, and something hasn't gotten done. But if you can get him and not have to give up that much for him, then go ahead and do it, because you have this cap space. There's no guarantee that you're going to be able to get somebody to take your cap space. So you might as well trade for a guy if that option is there. But if it's me, I'm not making a move like that until the summer and you see how things fall with free agency.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And also you want to wait and see how things fall with the draft too. What if they wind up getting the number 1 pick and now you're getting Victor Wembanyama, and now you have this big glut of guys who all play the same position or play, in that kind of position area, and you just don't have the minutes for everybody. So if it were me, I would wait on a move like that. If they're going to add a guy at the deadline, it needs to be a guard. That's the spot that they really need to focus on. Just go out and get a guard.
Yeah, a guard. I wouldn't mind a shooter, but a guard is, like, to me, 1, 2, and 3. Like, it's so by far ahead of anything else that they need. Shooter, like a good 3-and-D, but like an actual they don't have any shooting. So like an actual shooter would be like far down second on my list. And then, of course, obviously, John Collins is neither. He's a very, very good basketball player and a versatile basketball player who can do a lot of things, but wouldn't fall along either one of those lines to me. At least not for where this team is at and what their actual needs are. And again, you mentioned it. The positional redundancy is part of it that doesn't make much sense to me, even though there's the argument there that he's probably better than most players that you have. And so, like, him displacing somebody isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world if he's better than the next guy. So that's cool. But then also the first thing that you mentioned about, like, wanting to wait and see what you're going to do with that money in the summer in free agency. Like, to me, I don't know. To me, I thought it was interesting that you said too, though, like, man, who's to say for sure that you're going to be able to spend that money? And maybe he's the smart way to do it. I don't think I had thought of it that way, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking at it the other way of, hey, like, this is going to bringing in John Collins makes free agency less eventful for you. And maybe there's a part of me that's not accepting that free agency is dying. It's not the same as it used to be, or it doesn't necessarily look the same as it used to. So, but I don't know. It makes more sense to me to not do the positional redundancy, wait for the draft, and also wait for free agency to see, like, who's on the market and what your needs are, at that point, in the summer, after you've drafted and everything.
Yeah, and there's other teams that will be in the market for John Collins. So do you want to put yourself into maybe some sort of a bidding war for a guy that you maybe don't need at this point and could limit some of your options moving forward? So I understand why they would want to go in that direction. I don't think if it were me in charge, I would not. But if you can get him for 75 cents on the dollar and there's nobody else out there, then give it a shot, because there's no guarantee that you'll be able to get a player as good as John Collins in free agency. And I don't think that it would take away enough of your flexibility to where you couldn't add somebody else if there were maybe a guard out there who has a beard and plays in Philly right now, if you wanted to go in that direction.
Spicy, real spicy, and I am actually looking forward to it. I'm here for a hot mess, man, and I think it could be beautiful basketball, and I think it could also be a hot mess, and I like both. I'm a fan of basketball and hot messes, so bring it on, bring it to me, inject it in my veins. Let's do this again later on in the week, man. They're gonna play the Oklahoma City Thunder on Wednesday, and then they'll play the Toronto Raptors on Friday. So we can chit chat in between then and see what's going on with the team. That's Adam Spolane. I am Brandon Scott. We appreciate Austin Mendez for producing this bad boy. This has been the H-Town Hoops podcast. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review, tell your people about it. And until next time, y'all be good.